Good morning, my name is Harry Chapman and welcome to the first in our series of DTX Talks. These sessions will be taking place with technology leaders over the coming months and covering the overarching topic of preparing technology for the new normal. Our recent surveys, which have reached over 500 tech executives and enterprises, have shown that digital culture, rather than the technology itself, continues to be the number one challenge facing them when carrying out transformation projects. Culture is particularly relevant at this time where many businesses have had to transform rapidly over recent months. With this in mind, I'm really pleased to be joined by David Germain today, Group and UK and Ireland Chief Information Officer at RSA Insurance, the company responsible for the More Than brand and many other products. David will be talking about creating an effective digital culture in the short term. Where should you focus precious team, energy, time and resources? Welcome, David.
Good morning, Harry, and thanks for having me here today.
Before I hand over to David for his 15 minutes of remarks, it's important to point out that you should feel free to send questions in via the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. So David, over to you.
That's great, thank you. So look, first of all, before we get started, I just want to say thank you for everyone joining the webinar today. I hope you're all keeping safe and sound with your families at home and you're not impacted by COVID, and more importantly, your businesses are all up and running and operable. So that's a start. I think Harry asked me to sort of spend a bit of time talking about digital culture, and there's probably many people listening in on this who have got probably more experience than myself on this topic. But I want to come at it from a different perspective, which is very business orientated. And I don't want to just spend time talking about the tech, because the tech is very pervasive. And depending on your organization, will depend on the different types of architectures you deploy. So we'll spend a bit of time talking about what I've learned in the last 3 months, because they've been deeply challenging, not just for our business, but for the global industry, agnostic of any sector. I think the starting point for me is when we think about digital culture, what does that really mean for the organization? I think we as human beings shape how we interact with technology, never more so than with what I call the fifth industrial revolution. And actually it's not what I call it, it's what it is, right? We've never seen such technology disruption in the industry as we have done in the past preceding years. I think the disruption of technology has led to so much innovation, and we see that all the time with green shoots, new technologies, new adapters, services changing, new sectors arising, platforms becoming monetized relatively quickly. We can't ignore that disruption in the industry. We can't ignore what it's doing to business, what it's doing to how consumers want to behave, what it's doing to traditional business models. I think the last one is the relationships between humans and technology. And like myself, I'm sure most of you have got young families, have got kids. I have 3 boys. They each have iPads. My 5-year-old is probably better on an iPad than I am. They have a natural tuition now for using technology. There is an expectation from a younger generation that everything will be touched, digitized, automated, and the physical attributes, we will be moving away from that. And I'm not too sure if that's really good from a morality perspective for human beings, but from the perspective of technology and disruption and the digital culture, it's the world we live in. We have to embrace that, and that will be the future of business. Why should we embrace digital culture? And again, I think there's a few areas here that we need to sort of be cognizant of. The first is every organization has to break down its hierarchy. And we saw that in the last 3 months. I'll relate it back to the last 3 months. We would not have got our business up and mobile and performing if we hadn't broken down hierarchies in the organization, business continuity teams, working with frontline teams, figuring out what the core services are we had to have online, getting individuals who had a very good understanding of business products and services to work with underlying engineering teams and break those silos and processes down and just have, what I call good people interacting and working together. So I think the first point I'd like to raise there is making sure your hierarchy, you understand it, you change it, you adapt to it, you speed it up. Don't let the process slow you down. And if it does slow you down, you need to change the process. The second is encouraging experimentation. That leads to enhancing learning and improving the workforce. Again, in the past 3 months, one of the areas we learned is we carry a lot of legacy in our business. Getting legacy systems to work with new technologies, myth busting, as I call it, a myriad of things which potentially you were told historically you could never do that. Actually, you've had no choice but to get these systems to work, because you've got back office teams that need to support customers, need to interact with customers, and they're going to be working from home. So I would always ask everyone to innovate, experiment. That leads to new performance, new levels of productivity in the organization. That's something which we're absolutely going to continue to take forward as an organization, and make sure we build up teams that can do that with the right level of ingenuity in mind. I think the final one around that for me would be talent attraction. It's very clear to me, with the level of technologies we are procuring and moving towards, what type of teams and professionals and individuals do we now need? And some of this is agnostic of sector. Some of it is very specific to sectors. If I think about financial services, banking, insurance sectors I've worked in most of my career, we're looking at what I call low-code environments. We're not technology organizations per se. We're digital product service providers. And the teams which we're starting to build need to have a very good understanding of subject matter expertise in the business, really understand product lines, really understand distribution channels, really understand business processes and how they're underpinned with technologies, good understanding of architectures, really good understanding of the technologies in the industry and how you can build an ecosystem around them, around your products and services. And I think we're seeing that with millennials and Generation Zs and the individuals who want to work in our field but have a very good understanding of business information systems, compared to historically it was very computer science orientated. And I think those individuals will end up in what I call technology service sectors, not necessarily in financial services, because the work is subtly starting to change. You don't necessarily need to be a strong developer to work in the sector I'm in, but you absolutely need to understand products and services and how we go to market and how we shape product pools and growth pools, etc., etc. I want to sort of talk a little bit around what is the digital experience and what does a digital experience really mean, because we all have a different definition for digital. And historically, digital has always been, well, isn't it extranet? Isn't it web interaction? No. I have a view which is creating a dynamic online services aided with no physical aspects is really what we talk about when we think about digital. And a great example of that, and a basic example, is historically paper-based processes were automated. That's really not digital. That's just automating a manual process. And what makes that process digital is if it's dynamic, i.e. it's an application process. You want to, let's say it's a transaction process, you're doing some level of funding. You want to be able to self-serve on a portal. You want to be able to interact with that online application. You want to be able to sign it online, move it through another process. When we talk about digital experiences, that's what we're talking about. And if I think about the last 3 months for our organization, the more online digital experiences we can have will create a better consumer platform, will create a better consumer experience longer term. And that's a piece of work which most organizations are now doing. How much of the physical aspects can we remove? Can we create more of a dynamic online service experience, where you can avoid the physical aspects? And I think that's what we're seeing in the industry. And I think consumers want that, consumers demand that, and their expectation of traditional business models are that we're transforming our organizations towards that approach. The next aspect is how do we create that social collaboration around digital experiences? And I think the only way you can really do that is by spending time in the front line, spending time with your customers, being clear on what they want, what they're asking for. We've seen in the past 3 or 4 months, it's been really important We adapt our services, we adapt our processes towards what our customers do want. We're very clear internally that we're not too internally focused, but we spend more time being externally focused. That becomes quite key in the feedback you receive, so you can analyze and understand your processes, what works and what doesn't work. And again, like most organizations, we've been very much focused on that as we've started to pivot to changing demands, changing needs of our customers. With that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a digital effectiveness survey, and I want to give you guys some metrics. I do a lot of reading on this topic to understand what's going on across the industry. And I've got a survey here, and I want to give you the sort of the key barriers and what our professionals like ourselves are actually saying about this. So which are the most significant challenges to meeting digital priorities? And this is a survey by McKinsey. And it talks to cultural behaviors and challenges. And it was 2,500 respondents, and 33% of those respondents said that the major area to challenges for their organization is cultural behaviors and challenges. And I sort of agree on that. You know, some of this is a leap of faith. Some of this requires a lot of change in terms of processes that need to be transformed, internal bureaucracy or perceived bureaucracy that needs to change. I can give you a great example. I struggle in this space because I sort of, you know, that command and control nature of being a CIO, you want everything to come to you. You want to pre-approve everything. You want watertight business cases. If you're moving into a different cultural and behavior, you have to let go. You still have to lean in, but you have to let go. You have to give autonomy to your teams. You have to allow them to make mistakes and come to you and learn and create that knowledge workforce. So I think, you know, we're all going to be challenged with the culture and behaviors at every tier in our organization. I think the next one is lack of understanding of digital trends. It's really important you understand, like I've said in earlier, what our consumers want, what they need. That will allow you to reinforce to your business, to your business ET, to your executives, the changing landscape around you. How do you retain being competitive with your competitors? And how do you get ahead of the game if required? So, you know, lack of understanding of digital trends, please make sure you're spending time to understand that. We talked a little bit about lack of talent for digital. It's an interesting skill set. It's a different skill set. And I would ask you, don't get caught up with it's extranet, it's UX. It's not. That's just one aspect of it. It's really understanding those key moments of truth in your organization, what really provides a great customer experience. If you really understand what provides a great customer experience, how do you improve on that customer experience? So knowledge of the business, for me, is the most important critical skill you can have if you want to become a digital leader in your organization. The next one was lack of IT infrastructure. And that's a tough one, right? We all carry a strategy for infrastructure. It's either on-premise, it's either a private cloud, a public cloud, a cloud taking advantage of SaaS solutions. Everyone's doing something different, and most organizations are doing a bit of everything because they can't just move from one node to another. I look at it as a bimodal strategy for our business. We carry a legacy, we accept we carry a legacy. To improve that legacy, we try to transform to new code, and then we remove our legacy over time. So I can't just, you know, piecemeal or home or take out everything at the same time. We have to decouple these things over time based on the priorities of the organization and the priorities of products and services. Organizational structure and not being aligned, that was another one that came through on the survey. I think that's key, right? And that's where we talk a bit about the breaking down the hierarchy. Really important you understand what it is to have a digital organization. Teams work in a flat structure. Teams come together based on disciplines and skill sets. They don't come together based on functions. Mature organizations can do that. Immature organizations struggle with that, but they still try to do transformation programs within a set functional hierarchy, which never works. So be aware of that. Make sure you'll set yourself up for capability. You set your organization up for that in the future. A couple of other areas, lack of dedicated funding. This is not an R&D program. Digital is not R&D. You're not experimenting with stuff. You're developing customer outcomes. Your funding should relate to customer outcomes and programs that relate to transformation, whatever it may be for your business. Work with your finance directors, work with your change teams, make sure everyone understands this is not agile and we're just doing it for the sake of doing agile. It's really about getting customer outcomes, and the funding needs to be Paretoed towards that. We talk about lack of internal alignment, digital versus traditional businesses. Again, that's the same view for me. It all comes back to the hierarchy of your organization. It will be a challenging conversation with technology, change, finance, and any other enabling part of the organization. How do you rebuild these organizations up so they're working more harmoniously and less in silos? Business processes too rigid. What we've seen in the industry is a number of organizations providing packaged solutions with vanilla processes. The argument's always going to be, how much customization do we need? What is real customization and what is real competitive advantage? And that's where you have to challenge your business if you really want to be in a digital environment. Highly proprietized platforms need to be fed and watered significantly more than low-code platforms. That's they're on a more conformant path. Challenging, not easy. I haven't managed to fix that yet for our organization, but it's something which you should definitely be aware of. We need to push more towards less customization, unless it's really about competitive advantage, and then you can architect for that. Would be wrong of me to talk about data. Data is a paramount of importance. It's probably high priority in the scheme of things, but you need to figure out how do you look, what is data to your organization? Is it something which you can monetize? Is it something which you're getting insights for to build products and services of the future? You need to be very clear around what your data strategy and capability needs to look like. And then the final one on this McKinsey report is lack of senior support. And I think for this to really work, senior executives need to really understand what digital is, what digital culture is, what they need to embrace, what they need to move towards. Many organizations have done it. I can name a handful right now. It's challenging, it's hard work, you fail, you repeat, you fail, you repeat. Not everyone wants to come on that journey, not everyone believes in it. But I would always say, if you believe in the products and services, you will absolutely believe in moving to a digital paradigm and having that shift. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you can start to disrupt the market. So Harry, that's it. That's it for me. That's my 15 minutes of fame. Thank you. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, David. A great 15 minutes of fame it was. As you can imagine, we've had quite a few questions coming through, and I think it's really interesting because you talked about hierarchy a lot. I think that's really important within an organization and how you manage it. One of the questions we actually got sent through yesterday was, how do you handle team members who are essential to your operation due to their deep knowledge of legacy tech, but either have no desire or appetite to change how they work, or perhaps just fear that they may not be capable of operating in this new world? And how does that impact from a hierarchical perspective as well?
I've been challenged with that in probably the last 3 firms I've worked at, where the organizations I've worked at, the technology functions have all got high tenure, i.e. individuals with 15 to 25 years worth of experience. They're all key man risks. They all understand applications at the underlying level. They're not around. You can't do change projects, analysis. Everything comes back to, a finite group of people. What the conversations I've had with these individuals in the past has all been around sustainable solutions for the business, the role they play in moving the organization forward, and how I'd like them to mentor another generation coming through. Because the next generation coming through, you sort of learn from each other, right? A younger generation definitely believe they have all the answers. They look at some of the generation beyond, and they sort of feel, well, I can do that better, smarter, using different technologies, without realizing the underlying complexity of working in a highly developed, proprietized environment, which is very different to a low-code environment. So what I try to do is bring different dynamics together, bring different demographics together, ask them to work together. I ask the long-tenured individuals, who I deeply respect, by the way, and understand the constraints they've had to work with in their career, to support me with ensuring that knowledge transfer is done appropriately, either to outsource organizations, or I pair them up with a different demographic of professional to make sure their knowledge sharing as well. And on projects, I get them to all work together, and at different points, different individuals will take the lead on those projects. So I think it's about, appreciating what each individual brings to the table in terms of their commitment, their career orientation, their experiences, but you have to plan for the future as well. And you have to have honest conversations. I think everyone can be upskilled. That's the first thing, right? There's no two ways about it. If you're a technologist, you can be upskilled, but you have to want to be upskilled, and you have to be supported and nurtured to do that work. And pairing people up together is a really good way of doing it, because they can support each other through that transformation process.
It's a good view to have, really supporting people, I guess, through that organisation as well, because I think that must create a culture of support around the company, which I think is essential for any form of transformation. Just kind of moving on from the kind of hierarchical people perspective, you talked quite a bit, I guess, about business cases and experimentation within the organisation. This comes into a question from Justin Cousins. He said, you mentioned watertight business cases earlier in the session outside of cost considerations. What else needs to be present within a business case for you to regard it as watertight?
Well, Justin, thanks for asking the question. And let's take a step back. I would like to not work with a business case. Yeah. As a technologist, I wish I didn't have to deal with a business case at all. I was brought up in my career to present to executives the usual stuff, right? Return on equity, internal rate of return, net present values, paybacks within 2 years, all the stuff we know. If you want it to be signed off by a CFO, they're the metrics you need to present. What I've been trying to do in the latter part of my career is talk to business leaders around what type of business do they want, right? And if you spend time around me, you'll hear me say that a lot. What type of business do you want? The type of business you want to build is where we can move the technology towards. We won't always have an MPV that hits a hurdle rate. We won't always have the ROE in the right. We won't always have the ROE at a point where it's expected and managed by the business. We have to think beyond just the natural financial metrics of any business case. And then unless it's really underpinned and it's a growth new green shoot product, or you're doing some kind of replatforming where you're taking out some of old kit, that's decommissioning. They're easy to measure and manage. But if you're paving the way for something new, executives need to appreciate it won't necessarily hit all the financial metrics. It's digital. You're changing how you want to work with your consumers. It's changing business models. You're disrupting the organization. There has to be a vision. There has to be a strong belief to back that. It can't be on a spreadsheet, Justin. So I will ask you, think differently. Don't get too caught up with it's the MP, the IR, the usual stuff. Talk a bit about the volumetrics of the organization. Talk a bit about the products and services that are going to the market. Talk a bit about the customers you want to interact with. You might want to change your customer base, as an example, right? These are the data and the insights you get from that will allow you to start figuring out what does that business case need to look like, which is beyond, in my opinion, beyond just the traditional financial metrics of any organization. So probably not the answer you expected, but I want technology professionals to be more visionary, and I want technology professionals to be less around just going to their CFOs and being bounced away because they haven't calculated things appropriately. Let's have a tougher conversation around the business you want to be in and what technology can do to support that vision.
Thanks, David. Some good insights there, I think. You talked quite a lot about talent in your 15 minutes at the start, and we had a really good question come in from Cheryl Bell on that. She asked, have you witnessed in the last 3 months companies increasing their digital skills exponentially because of what's been going on? And do you think it's been a success from your standpoint, I guess, within RSA?
Yeah, Cheryl, thanks for asking the question. Actually, Cheryl, you share the same name as my elder sister, so it's a fantastic name, right? So look, talent is tough. Digital talent is tough because first of all, you've got to define what is digital talent. And like I said, it's a pervasive technology. In my mind, digital talent isn't a UX individual. It's not a web designer. It's not someone that deals with extranets. It's really good product expertise in the organization, people that really understand products, market distribution, consumer interaction, business processes. Those folks, by the way, already sit in your business. They already sit in your business. What you have to do is nurture them, develop them, upskill them, so they can work in a transformation environment and lead transformation for your business units. They already sit there. Some of them could sit in finance. Some of them could be in commercial teams. Some of them could be in back office teams. They're all there. They've all got fantastic knowledge about your business and your processes, but we have to pull them out of their environment. And the minute you use the word digital, you're expected to have this strong technology background behind you. Like I said, with the way that technologies are moving, you don't necessarily need to understand full stack integration anymore. You just need to understand what's your distribution channels, what your processes are, how you want to interact with your consumers, and surround yourself with good technology and engineering teams that can build up those product factories for you. So we in RSA, that's our strategy. We have those folks, we're nurturing them, we're moving them, we're upskilling them, we're training them. That's our plan. We've got digital guys on the front end that do UX, we've got a big digital team there, but I'm more interested in really strong product leaders that can help transform the organization, and surrounding those individuals with strong technology professionals who understand how to develop architectures and ecosystems. So I hope that answers your question, Shane.
Thanks, David. And I think we've got time for one or two more questions just coming through. I think there's one here from Pravina Menon, and Pravina talks quite a bit. I think you went into your presentation, David, about technology and prioritizing things, and Pravina asked specifically, you gave a very relevant definition for digital as a culture. An organization might be building, it might be going to digital, but even under digital transformation, there are so many initiatives. So how do you prioritize? Is it always what the customers will get from it, or is it how the business will benefit from it, the employees, or something else?
Yeah, and Praveen, thanks, what a great question. There is not one organization I haven't worked in, or comrades and colleagues I've worked with in the industry that haven't suffered with prioritization. And where they always end up with prioritization is they don't prioritize, because nothing ever gets stopped, right? We seem to concurrently, in parallel, have change portfolios that are far too big for the work we actually want to do. So I have a view, and I split it into a few different groupings, and it's totally dependent on sector as well, but I'll give you a view, my personal view. I expect to see a percentage of your portfolio focused towards online, commercial, customer journeys, all that good stuff to improve the experiences for your customer. You have to do that. I expect to see a percentage of the portfolio focused on automation, in-house productivity to improve your expense ratios. You have to continuously do that to stay competitive, to improve your profitability and your margins. So if you're not growing top line through customer journeys, and you're not doing stuff internally through productivity, then you have to ask yourself the questions: what type of business do you have? I expect to be some stuff around risk, compliance, all the stuff which is legacy, refresh, currency, debt. You have to spend a percentage of your time doing that. Historically, we've always talked about we've got to have an R&D arm. The R&D arm, by the way, sits in the commercial customer experience type stuff and in the productivity. If it's not got an outcome associated to it, why would you do any R&D? So you don't experiment for the sake of experimenting. So when I think about a portfolio or pie, you have to have these percentages focused on these different outcomes for your organization. And then you have to, within the pie, you have to agree on 1, 2, or 3 based on the capacity you have and how much work you can actually do concurrently and in a given year. The technology, the correlation of that and those projects are totally dependent on business change and how much change you can absorb in your organization. So, Praveen, when you're talking to your teams, keep that in mind. You know, we as technologists, we can do multiple concurrent projects, right? We can set up environments that can do that if the company wants to spend that type of money, that value. But the business can only absorb so much change. And that's where you have to have a bit of tension and make sure you're prioritizing things appropriately across the portfolio. So I hope that answers your question for me.
Thanks, David, and some really good insights there. As we kind of fast approach the end of our time, we'll be wrapping up there on the Q&A. And David, I think I just want to say thanks so much for joining us here today. I think we've had a really insightful session, and that's been reflected by the questions coming in on the chat, but also a lot of the compliments coming in on the chat as well. So thank you for all our listeners. I want to ask you to look out for our next session tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. with Sir Nigel Shadbolt. That's focused on implementing AI, analytics, and automation ethically in a volatile business environment. I think we've really, I guess, scratched the top of the surface with digital culture here today, David. So do remember that you can hear more on all these important topics at the Digital Transformation Expo taking place on the 30th of September and 1st of October, where David and many other excellent speakers from businesses such as Rolls-Royce and HSBC will be tackling the topic of digital culture. Thanks for everyone for listening, and thank you, David, for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you, Harry.